to the garage area. This is our Talladega Recap show. A race weekend that we ended up seeing Jesse Love get his first win in the Xfinity Series, and we saw Tyler Reddick get his first win of the year in the Cup Series. Let's start with the Xfinity race. I didn't see the actual race itself. Ryan, I know you watched it. I watched a highlight video that NASCAR puts out on YouTube, and the thing that I thought was interesting about the Xfinity race is it was the drop of the green flag, 2 laps to go stage 1, start of stage 2, 2 laps to go stage 2, start of stage 3, and about the last 5 laps of the race was the entire video. Yeah. There were no laps in between there that they put in there, so there obviously weren't a whole lot of highlights in between that, I'm guessing. Yeah. What was the racing like?
I thought it was decent racing, passing and stuff, side by side. I mean, of course, Jesse Love and Austin Hill with the RCR cars are always the fastest at the restrictor plate tracks and stuff. So it was, I believe, Jesse Love won stage 1, and Hill won stage 2. Justin Allgaier took a pretty hard lick there on the final lap of stage 1.
Yeah.
And I don't know about those. What do you think about them walls that kind of point out like that?
I understand why they're there, but at the same point, like, you got to do something different.
Yeah, I just feel like every time a car hits that, it reminds me of Jeff Gordon's Las Vegas hit.
Yeah.
Because that wall, that angled wall, you're hitting it, sliding down there at the angle. I don't see why they couldn't like keep the wall straight and then inset a wall past it. I think that would be better. But
if anything, you should angle the opposite direction. Like if you had, instead of the angle flaring towards the racetrack, it should flare back toward the inside of the racetrack. And if a safety car has to kind of come out and then turn, that I would think you'd be better off than having to come
something like that. Yeah. But after that, I don't remember much of stage 2. I mean, I had it on mainly doing other things, but of course Austin Hill won, and I know there was some fuel strategy and stuff. A couple cars ran out of fuel there at the end, green white checkers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Austin Hill did make a late try to pop up block over past Kligerman. He got loose off of Kligerman's. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, but
Parker Kligerman, yeah, the 48.
Yeah, off of his bumper. So that took out a few cars, and it was pretty much the best car up front left was Austin Hill with a bunch of back markers, I'll call them.
Haley Deegan was 4th on that restart.
Yeah. So I mean. So once he got out front, he was pretty hard to pass at that point. So he went on and got his first ever Xfinity victory.
Jesse Love, you're talking.
Jesse Love,
yeah. After Hill wrecked, it didn't leave a whole lot of other top tier team options up there. Brandon Jones, I know, wrecked. Pretty much all the junior motorsports cars got wiped out, didn't they?
Yeah.
And it is pretty much JRM, Joe Gibbs, and RCR in the Xfinity Series. What about the Joe Gibbs cars? How did they do on the day? I didn't see much of them up front.
They were like 5th to 10th on back or something like that. So, but I think one of the 18 or the 81, I get them mixed up. They look nearly similar. One of them was up front there late, but
so Jesse Love ended up winning the race. What was the top 5 rundown of that event?
Jesse Love, Riley Herbst, Anthony Alfredo, and Leland Honeyman. So that tells you who was up front, because there's Ben Pohl, there's a Cesar Barcarella.
Cesar Baccarella,
and Benedetto. Those guys are in the top 10 and stuff.
I know that by watching the actual finish of the race, it looked like Brennan Poole was going to have a shot at actually winning the race, and it just didn't shake out for him there at the end either. Like you said, fuel strategy seemed to play a big part in it. Guys running out at the end seemed to cause some problems for some people. I was not at all disappointed to see Austin Hill wreck. He is becoming a villain in short order, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And cool to see Jesse Love get the win. We don't dislike him yet. So we'll see how that all goes. Anything else you want to talk about from the Xfinity race?
That's all I got.
There really, I don't think, is a ton to talk about from the Cup race either. I mean, we'll talk about the finish for sure, but let's just start with the actual race review here. Reddick gets the win. He ended up starting 18th, led 13 laps, and due to a final lap wreck, he ends up getting the win. And that's not totally fair because he was competing for the win. He was running up front for the last probably 20 laps with Brad Keselowski and Michael McDowell battling for the lead. Truex pushing him pretty hard. And it was the move that Keselowski and McDowell made that really opened up the door for Tyler Reddick to end up taking the win in what looked like a Mercedes-Benz sponsored race car. The Jumpman logo was on the car this week, and it had a circle around it, and it looked that's the first thing I thought it was the Mercedes-Benz logo on that car. They showed Michael Jordan a lot, probably trying to get some interest from this race, being that the racing itself was pretty terrible. You said it last week at the end of the race, or at the end of our podcast when we talked about looking forward to Talladega. You immediately said, going to be a fuel mileage race.
Yeah.
And it was. All day long, everybody just hold and serve, trying to save fuel.
Yeah, they're running 5 to 10 miles an hour less than they would be in their solo qualifying. I mean, they should be running quicker than their qualifying laps. So.
What really irritated me is two things about this race. I understand that NASCAR's got to pay bills. I understand the TV broadcast has got to pay bills. And so there's going to be commercials.
Yeah.
There was commercials constantly in this race. Like, an absurd amount of commercials.
That's what it seemed like. I don't know. I just feel like by the time I look back up to watch from one commercial, they were going right back into another. So. And
to be fair, for the most of the race, it didn't bother me. It was noticeable, but it didn't bother me because nothing was happening.
Yeah.
Like, even if they were 3 wide, they weren't going anywhere because, like you said, they were running 10 seconds off the pace. Yeah. And it was with 8 laps to go in stage 2, I think it was, that they went to commercial, and I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I did see that.
That one bothered me a little bit.
Yeah.
That I just couldn't wrap my head around how we're going to commercial with one of our more exciting parts of this race.
Yeah.
And a race that hasn't had a whole lot of excitement to start with. I bet you it's that race car.
Yeah.
That's playing a factor. Get people all fired up on TikTok again this week. As far as the way the race played out, like we said, a lot of fuel saving. Austin Cindric won stage 1, and Joey Logano won stage 2. So Ford, coming into the weekend, it was under a lot of pressure to win because they had not won yet this season. This seemed like it was going to be a good racetrack for them to win at. You had a Ford on the pole with Michael McDowell. He stayed up front a lot. He was my pick this week, led 36 laps. And as we said, Cindric and Logano, 2 Ford Penske cars, won the first 2 stages. Cindric led 16 laps. Logano led 22 laps on the day. And with McDowell leading the most at 36, I mean, Ford had it out front a lot of the day.
Yeah.
Definitely no question about that. They were fast. Cindric ended up finishing 23rd. Logano 19th. They were both caught up in that wreck at the end, and that certainly hindered their finishes that were better than that, but not by a whole lot. I mean, the end of that race, they were just gridlocked 2 by 2.
Yeah.
And that was probably the most annoying thing. I'm like, you kept waiting for it to get good because the fuel saving was out the window at this point. Everybody was going to go to the end, and the pushes were going to get bigger, and you're going to see a third lane form, which it tried to and could go nowhere.
It seemed like if Chase Elliott could shove SVG up there, that was the most I seen the line work when they're not fuel saving. So when Chase was pushing SVG. But once Busch and Gibbs tried to jump up there and take advantage of it, the whole line just died. So
yeah.
I don't know what it is with if it just happened to work with them 2 drivers there and the other drivers ruined it, or
I don't know if
aggressive enough.
I don't know if they got too aggressive and everybody got swirled up and broke apart, and there wasn't enough time to rebuild the run or what.
Yeah.
That was my initial impression of that. I don't know if that's actually accurate or not. There was only 2 cautions for incident. 2 official cautions, I'll say, because big wreck at the end would have been a caution had it not been coming through the tri-oval.
Yeah.
So certainly it should have been not a counted caution against the race. The first one being for the wreck with Christopher Bell. I can't remember who else was involved with him in that. Let me look and see real quick. He pounded the fence pretty hard.
Yeah, I know some people checked up in front of him. I think Chase hit one guy pretty hard, but I mean Chase's car was all right, but I don't remember who else was.
It was the 51. That's who it was Justin Haley.
Justin Haley.
He got turned into the 20 car, who just pounded the outside wall on the backstretch. Nobody else, none of the other cars listed in the accident seemed to be too badly hurt from it, which was the 14 of Chase Briscoe, the 71 of Zane Smith and the 12 of Ryan Blaney. Blaney just barely brushed him when he went by.
Yeah.
It wasn't any serious damage by any means. The other incident was a split decision on fuel strategy. You had the Fords and Chevys that were gonna basically just try to run a slow pace and make it to the end.
Yeah.
And the Toyotas all lined up, and what was that, about 15 to go? Or was it longer? No, it was longer
than that, yeah.
Maybe 25 to go.
Something like that.
Somewhere in that range. The Toyotas decided that they were going to get together, come to pit road, put fuel in it, and basically what they were going to do was spend the least amount of time on pit road possible, come out as tight together, and try to outrun those cars should there be a caution.
Yeah.
That was their plan. And there was a caution. The problem was they were the caution.
Yeah.
Tyler Reddick was leading the line. He was fine. It was the 42 and the 43 and I'm trying to think who else. The 23, Bubba Wallace. So it was John Hunter Nemechek that pushed, from my vantage point, pushed Bubba Wallace into Eric Jones. Jones hit the outside wall really hard. That collected Denny Hamlin as well. The 23 was all tore up. The 42 had the right side torn off. The 43, I think you told me that Eric Jones actually went to the hospital afterwards.
Yeah, he went to a local.
He did do an interview outside of the care center, so he must not have been horrible, and it must have been some cautionary stuff that they took him to
They
the
said
hospital
on his
for.
radio he was complaining about his back before he got out of the car. So,
I know he said he was sore in the post-race interview. Or in the care center interview. He was definitely feeling the effects. That's for sure.
yeah.
So the number one thing that the Toyota group could not have happen was a caution. Well, they wanted a caution, but not for them to be the caution. And Tyler Reddick and Martin Truex Jr. still gained an advantage from that. They restarted together on the outside lane, and they stayed there all the way to the finish pretty much.
Yeah.
Until they ended up starting to wreck. I really don't have much else to talk about from the racing itself, so we'll just go ahead and get right to the finish of the race. We had Truex pushing Reddick, and we had Keselowski pushing McDowell. McDowell was controlling the two lines, and at the very least was staying in front of Keselowski. Gregson was behind him. He had three Fords on the bottom, really working well together. It was the two Toyotas and a bunch of Chevys behind him. And coming down the backstretch on the final lap, you could see there was no pressure coming from a third lane. It was gone, no longer developed. There was just two lanes outside of each other, pushing as hard as they could go. And coming down the backstretch, Keselowski just shoved McDowell out there, and the outside lane broke up a little bit. They lost their momentum. And I said to you, as we sat here and watched it, I said, Brad Keselowski is going to win this race.
Yeah.
And he almost did. He had McDowell shoved out there pretty good. He backed up to the 10 of Gregson. Coming off of 4, he faked McDowell high. McDowell went up to cover, and Brad slipped it back down low. And McDowell just had a whole handful of wheel going all the way to the right up to the wall, and then came all the way back to the left. And when he came back to the left and tried to straighten up, he just kissed off Keselowski's bumper and boom, pounded the outside wall. Because Brad was trying to keep from wrecking him, he lost all his momentum, and I don't think Reddick ever even attempted to lift.
No,
he just,
who would?
he just kept it right on the outside and went blowing by Keselowski and ended up making it back to the start-finish line first and ended up getting the win. Brad came home second. He's pretty disappointed because he certainly had an opportunity to win that race, and he had him set up perfectly.
Yeah.
McDowell just tried to cover up a block that the opportunity wasn't there. Speaking of big blocks, we should probably talk about Logano and Cindric. They came off pit road and trying to stay in front of the pack. They had Blaney with them, and I still don't think they would have had enough momentum to keep the pack from going blowing by them, but they might have been able to break things up a little bit better, to blend a little better than they did. Blaney had a pit road speeding penalty at that point, had to come back down pit road, and it was just Cindric and Logano. They got up in front of the pack to try to get them to slow down and break up a little bit, and Buescher was leading that line at the time, and he whipped that thing to the inside of Logano, made contact with it too, it looked like, just barely, and snaked his way through there. Cindric and Logano ended up staying up front because of that, but
I thought they blended 2 and 3 right there pretty much.
They ended up getting back up to 2 and 3. They were back to like 5th maybe, and then worked their way back up through the field. They did a great job at making that work, but boy, it was scary for a second. Let's talk about our picks. I picked Michael McDowell to win the race. He qualified on the pole. He led the most laps. He was leading to. I told you I wanted to go back to the last scoring loop. He was leading all the way off turn 4 into the tri-oval and ended up getting wrecked, or wrecked himself, however you want to look at that. His official finish is 31st. Ryan picked another Ryan, this time being Blaney, and he did not have a great day. He looked like he had a strong race car, but he couldn't come through the field after he got that speeding penalty. I have no idea if he got caught up in the wreck or not, but he was not running. He was running around 20th when he got wrecked, if he did get wrecked, and that's where he ended up finishing, was in the 20th position. So you do beat me by 11 positions, but I really think that this should be some sort of a moral victory for me and my particular team, and you take a 2-point lead on me in the point standings, and I'm really getting tired of you winning these races each week on the last couple laps or after a last restart or something, because I've got the guy that's running up front every week, or at least beating your guy, and then you somehow sneak it out at the very end. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah. When it comes to Talladega or Daytonas, it's really just a toss-up.
It really
what
is.
really is going to happen. But
Logano had a strong car today too. Obviously, my favorite driver. I was keeping a close eye on him, and at the end, he was 14th was his running position. Yeah. That's where he was at. He was not going anywhere.
I just feel like anymore his track position is so much. Just you're not gonna have the days of Dale Earnhardt going from
18th to first.
Yeah, I know. So
yeah,
it's.
I'm not gonna rant again this week, but I pounded the table last week telling you how bad this race car was. It is still a terrible race car. I do not like it. I cannot believe that was the Talladega race that we just watched. The thing that frustrated me was people online saying that, with this being a fuel mileage race, well, they're 3 wide all the way through the field. That's better than them running single file. It doesn't really make any difference to me. If they're 3 wide and they're not actually racing, what's the difference if it's that or single file? It doesn't really matter. And we saw some single file today. Yeah. It wasn't for a long period of time, but something's got to change here. This is bad.
I feel like these cars they talk about the drag on them.
Yeah.
And they just, I don't know what they need to do to change the drag or the science behind all these cars or what they had before.
I got an idea. I got a really good idea.
Yeah.
Give them more horsepower, give them narrower tires, raise them up off the ground, get rid of the diffuser and a giant spoiler. Get that thing off there too.
Yeah.
And let them go race.
Yeah.
That seems like a great idea, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's what they ought to try. I feel like they had this once before. Oh, the Gen 4 car.
Yeah.
That's what that was. We need to go back to something like that. I even had people online this week saying that we need to go back to the Gen 6 car, which I agree was better racing than this is. Yeah. It's painful.
I am curious the cost between an Xfinity car and a Cup car, because the Xfinity cars themselves are put on a better performance. They're got to be cheaper than the Cup cars.
You'd think.
You're trying to save these teams money, you might just throw them in other cars.
Yeah. I wouldn't be opposed to it by any means. We haven't done this in a little while, but let's talk about your expectations going into the weekend versus where they met or not. Did you think this would be a better race than it was?
Not really.
Okay. Do you think this was a good or a bad race?
I feel like it was a bad race.
Yeah.
Like I said last week, it's like, well, we're just going to be saving fuel.
Yeah.
I don't mind fuel mileage races and strategy and stuff, but they're saving fuel to get track position. That's why they're saving fuel. They're not saving fuel at the end of the race trying to make it to the end.
Yeah.
They're saving fuel for strategy to pass cars, because they can't pass cars without putting less fuel in them.
Yeah. It's sad, the state of the plate racing right now. I do agree. This actually was below my expectations, because I actually thought that at least at the end of the race, guys would start shoving each other and you'd have more runs than you actually saw. I thought that I kept sitting there waiting for something to happen, and nothing ever did at the end of the race.
I remember when guys didn't need a shove to be running. Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr. They'd whip out and pass a car by themselves. And
they could take the run that they gained in the draft.
Yeah,
that was cool, and I missed that a lot. Certainly did not meet my expectations and was a bad race. I'll be voting no in Jeff Gluck's poll tomorrow for sure. The only other guys that I thought were of any interesting note out of this race was Kyle Larson. He had to start at the tail end at the pack in order to start the race and have a pass-through penalty for illegal roof rails. I don't know if it's something similar to what the Stewart Haas cars had earlier in the year or not. I didn't look into it that much.
From what I saw, they got penalized for pushing the car out with the roof rails. So a crew member had his hand on the roof rails pushing the car. So the roof rails weren't illegal, but they considered it an illegal modification because they were pushing the car out when the crewman had her hand on it. And evidently that's against the rule or something.
Like how they used to bend that side skirt out. You had to start with it flat, but you could bend it out on a
Could
pit
be,
stop.
I don't know.
Whether or not that's an advantage. There's no way that guy pushes on the roof rail unless it's some sort of an advantage.
But they went back. The car went back through inspection and it passed inspection. So I don't know.
It went back through inspection after they flagged it for them pushing the car.
Yeah.
Then I don't know why you had a penalty.
Yeah.
That seems a little unnecessary to me.
Yeah.
But.
So I don't know the whole details. I don't, because Bob Pocker's the thing. It wasn't an illegal roof rail.
Huh.
And they just called it because you can't push the car out with your hand there or something.
That's interesting.
That's what it sounded to me. So
I'd be curious to get some more details on that from either Pockers or the guys on the teardown and find out what they got to say about that, because that seems like that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see Kyle Larson run well. And even that pass-through penalty did not hurt him bad enough to where he wasn't running in a decent position at the end of the race.
Yeah.
They were able to get their way back up through there. And he got caught up in the wreck at the end. I saw him sideways, same time I saw the 22 sideways, so I know that was part of his issue. The only other driver two other drivers that I thought were of note were Denny Hamlin. He spun coming to his first green flag pit stop. They had a lot of rain at Talladega, not for the race, but before the race, and seemed to be little pockets of water on the apron of the racetrack. He ended up getting spun around in one of those. And on a separate green flag pit stop, he ended up missing his pit box. So, seems like a lot of driver issues on pit road for Denny this week.
I saw someone on Twitter put traction detrimental.
That's good.
So,
traction detrimental.
Yeah.
Corey LaJoie also, he ended up spinning, leaving pit road in another one of those little puddles of water. And he also ended up finishing the race on his door in that final wreck. Josh Berry got a little bit airborne too, but the 7 car ended up being on the driver's side door, skating around the wall, and ended up going through the start-finish line, took the checkered flag in that position, and rolled back on all 4 wheels. So hopefully he doesn't personally have anything too damaging from that. Anything else that you wanted to talk about from the Cup race?
That's all I got.
That's all I really have too. It's unfortunate that we don't have anything more to say than that. One thing that I do want to recap a little bit is let's talk about the point standings. We didn't do that for the Xfinity Series race. The point standings coming into the weekend were Chandler Smith, Cole Custer, Austin Hill, Justin Allgaier, Jesse Love were the top 5, and Riley Herbst there in 6th. What are they now?
Yeah, the only difference was Jesse Love past Justin Allgaier.
So Love's in 3rd or in 4th, and Allgaier slipped to 5th.
Yeah,
well, that makes sense with Love winning the race and Allgaier ended up wrecking. For Cup points coming into the week, you had Kyle Larson as your leader, Martin Truex Jr. 2nd, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and you could say Ty Gibbs there in 6th. And after leaving Talladega, let me see, where was it at here? I almost said Michael McDowell. Kyle Larson, Martin Truex, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Tyler Reddick gets up there in 5th, and Denny falls down there to 6th. Ty Gibbs obviously didn't have the finish that he was looking for either, slipping to 8th. That really pretty much does it for this week as far as I can see. I don't know of anything else that really was noteworthy to talk about. I really hope that we see some changes at Dover.
Yeah.
There's last year, we didn't have a whole lot of hope for the 1.5 miles, and Charlotte was a good race. And I thought that Kansas was a good race. And there's a handful of other racetracks that even the majority of the racing is bad. You had these little bright spots throughout the year last year. I'm hoping that Dover's a bright spot because I thought that we actually started the year pretty well. But between the Fox broadcast and the on-track production, any hype that you had coming into the year with that Netflix documentary and anything else that was being promoted has really just deflated with the poor racing that we've seen recently. And I really hope that we're able to get that turned back around here shortly.
I am curious I know they run the intermediate package at Dover like they did at Bristol, and it being a concrete track. I'm curious what the tire will be.
Yeah, that could be a storyline coming into the weekend.
So
if the tires are anything like Bristol, hopefully they got them tamed up a little bit from that. But That could be an interesting race weekend. We'll see how that all shakes out. Anything else you want to talk about?
That's all I got.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, listening, subscribing, commenting, following us on TikTok, Instagram, X, Twitter, as we all know it's actually called, and anywhere else that you can find this podcast and our content. We really appreciate all the support, and we hope that you'll tune in after Dover for our post-race show then.